G'day, I'm Sean, and these are the brand new ARRI Pro camera accessories for the Sony Venice Extension System Mini. Let's get into it. So this is the new support system set from ARRI PCA, and it brings a couple of new features to PCA for the first time, including ARRI Bud support, but we'll get to that in just a second. Basically, what I've done here is try to use a bunch of PCA components to build a set that I think works really nicely for handheld operation. It's quite a neat little robust package. So we have quite a few things going on here, and I'm going to take you from top to bottom. First off, you can see up here we have the new CTH2. That is a center top handle, and it attaches via a NATO rail, which I have at the back of the camera here. Now, the CTH2 has a couple of cool things. It's quite adjustable. So there are two methods that I can use to swing the top handle here out of the way to get access to the filter module of the Venice Extension System Mini. So first off, well, I have a knob on the left-hand side here, which I can use to slide the whole handle through this section back here. I can't take it all the way through at the moment because I'm using the wooden shell from the hex extensions here to give me a nice solid grip on that top handle. But because I can't slide it all the way through, what I can also do, which is a first for an ARRI top handle, is I can undo this screw on the side, and we've actually put a rosette inside the handle mechanism. So I can run this around to the side, quickly change the filter or get access to my lens motor or any of those kind of things, and then put it back. And the reason that we have both mechanisms, a sliding and a swiveling mechanism here, apart from if you have accessories that you don't want to move, it means if you're using a system like an easy rig where you have it perfectly balanced from the fore and aft position here of the top handle, your balance won't change if you then swing the handle out of the way and put it back. Now, beneath the top handle, I mentioned we have a NATO rail. That NATO rail is also here on the side of the camera, and you can mount that to a bunch of other places, including the back, and we'll get to that in a second where we build this whole system from scratch. Moving towards the front, we have a new top plate here, which is compatible with both the PL mount and the LPL mount, which lights are making for this camera. And attached to the top plate, well, we have two side brackets. Now, these side brackets can be flipped upside down so that you can move them back if you need. Might be a good way to adjust the center of gravity of where your hand grips are. And these side brackets here are NATO rails as well. So they will work with any of the existing NATO rail clamps, including the new RC6, which I have, let's flip this around this way, mounted to our new wooden hand grip. Now, these wooden hand grips are beautifully sculpted little things that'll fit perfectly in your hand. And here we have a rosette, which I can adjust with this big screw on the side. So that's how I adjust the rotation of the grip. But because I have the new NATO grip, I can also adjust the NATO rail clamp. I can adjust the position here along the side bracket to get exactly the position that I want. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, underneath we have the new base plate for this camera. Now, this is the first time that we have added Bud support to a third-party camera system with the ARRI PCA. Now, Bud is Balanced Utility Dovetail, and that was the system that was introduced with the Alexa 35. And those plates look like this. Now, here we have a small selection of all of the Bud compatible plates that we have. They include things like the SAM plates, that's stabilizer adapter mount. We have a whole range of these. This is a SAM 6, which will slide with a toolless mechanism into the Artemis 2, Trinity 2, or into our remote heads. But of course, we also have versions available for TIFF and Steadicams and for GPI Pro and for the Ronin and the Movi. And all of these plates will slide into the bottom of the Venice Extension System Mini thanks to the Bud system. And I have a little safety stop and a huge range of adjustment that I can have here with this plate to get perfect balance in any of those devices. Now, of course, I can also slide something like the UAP4 if you just want to have a whole heap of mounting points because you're doing some kind of mounted rig with this camera. That's a good option. We have the marvelous CSP2, which is a very soft and very short little shoulder pad, good if you're doing handheld operation. And if you need rod support, well, you could of course consider adding something like the BPA6 here, which has 15mm rod support and snaps straight into a touch and go 120 system on a tripod. Or of course, the CBP, and this is one of 4 versions of the CBP for the Alexa 35, and they will all work. So if you're a rental house that is looking at picking up the ARRI PCA set for the Sony Venice Extension System Mini, then you probably have a bunch of compatible base plates that will work immediately when you pick up one of the sets for this camera. Now, obviously, this is kind of a big rig for a small camera, but we can also rig it in a very nice and neat way like this. So if you'd prefer to use the Venice Extension System Mini for rigging purposes, say on a motorcycle like they did in their launch film, well, you probably want as small an accessory package as possible. And the nice thing about our accessories is that you can have it really small and compact like this, or build it up into something you can use in a full production mode. So here we have a lot of the same components as before. We have the same top plate, and that is now mounted directly into the LPL mount, which is from Lights, but we will support the Gecko Cam mount as well. And if you've already noticed that there is only 1 screw mounted here, don't worry, 2 will work. That's just a prototyping thing with the mount at the moment. Now, further back, we have the same NATO rail bracket that we were using before. And if you wanted to run a top handle in this setup, you could of course use, say, an ARRI CTH1 or the CTH2 when you attach a NATO rail at the top here. Now, this NATO rail is kind of cool because it works at the back of the camera on the top here. It works on the side, even though, as you can see, the side holes are actually offset. They're not parallel or in a straight line with the sensor plane, but we support both orientations for the screws. This is a bespoke NATO rail specifically for this camera for that purpose, because it has to kind of accommodate all those different mounting hole layouts that Sony chose to use for this camera. You can also use the NATO rails at the back of the camera, but we have also developed a bespoke backplate for this camera because we figure this is the area that you're probably going to mount any sort of really solid hardcore mounting options like magic arms and suction cups, and it's good to have the flexibility of the backplate. Here you can see I'm using a little sprig to keep the cable kind of neat and tidy and out of the way, but you could replace this with the 2 NATO rails if you prefer to have something a bit more quick release. Now, if I wanted to add hand grips to this setup, there are 2 options. The first, of course, I kind of showed before. This is the NRC6. It's a new NATO rail clamp, and I can use that in combination with a hand grip extension like this RA7, which is released with the ZMU4, and that will slide very neatly in here. Let me just move the screw so I can slide this in the bottom, lock it off, and now I have a nice little hand grip. But as you can see, that adds a little bit of width to the camera system, which might be nice and ergonomic for you. But if you wanted to have a very slimline setup, then you can use the RA8, also from the ZMU4, which has a 3/8 inch screw here with pin lock holes, and I can mount that directly into the side of the side bracket, like so. And then I have a rosette, which I can then add a second wooden hand grip to, and you can see just how slim this whole system becomes when you are maybe working in really tight spaces, like a submarine, for example. And then here we have the 2 options for hand grip rigging, while we're still able to bring the hand grip forward so that you have a better, center of gravity for those whip pans and stuff like that. Okay. I hope that was a good basic overview. Let's now look at each of the components in detail, and we'll build up both the basic set and the pro set of accessories. So here we have the basic set of accessories, and we've primarily designed this package for rental houses who might already own a lot of other PCA components, especially base plates and top handles, because you neither get one of those with this. With this set of accessories, you can create a very small rig. So if you aren't aiming for, say, a production style rig with this camera or a handheld rig, then this would do you just fine. But just bear that in mind. If you are buying accessories for the first time, you'll probably want to look at the Pro set for this camera system. Now, we have basically here a top plate, a base plate, and a cable clamp to keep the cable nice and secure. We have 2 NATO rails I can put in many different positions. We have 2 side brackets, a rod mounting clamp, which is a NATO rail rod mounting clamp, and we have a reduction insert to go from 19mm rods to 15mm rods. Let's start with the top plate here. So there are 2 screws to attach this, and they of course are ARRI multi-hex screws, so I can use either a 3mm or a 4mm hex driver to screw these in. Now I haven't fully done these up just yet, and you'll notice that there's a bit of play here, and that's for a specific purpose because we need to support the differing screw hole positions for PL and LPL. So this will work with the PL mount, which is this one here from Sony, and it will also work with the LPL mount from GeckoCam and from Lights. And when you're using the PL mount, you want to make sure that the plate is pulled all the way backwards when you do up the screws so that it will allow you to still open the PL mount. Basically, it just means that these little ears on the PL mount will clear. Now we have a top plate, we could start mounting accessories. So we have 1/4 inch pin lock mounting holes. We have a 3/8 inch pin lock mounting holes, and there are 6 positions that I can run a RMB3 or any other device that we have with 2 M4 spaced pairs. So for example, just here I could run an RMB3 with a rod out the front, and over here at the top of the plate I might be able to mount a viewfinder cross pipe with a viewfinder. There are lots of options, and I have 2 here as well as a 3rd hole for the side brackets, but we'll get there in a second. Now, the second little part I want to talk about is this NATO rail. So this is specific for this camera system. We don't recommend it to be used as kind of a generic NATO rail because it's been designed to work with the very specific mounting holes that you get on the Sony Venice Mini Extension System. So you'll notice that if I move this around, there's a bit of play, and I can actually move this in a kind of L-shaped pattern. And that's because we have one set of hole spacing kind of here, and we have a completely different one on the side just here. But I can use the same NATO rail bar in both places. So if we start here with the side bracket, or the side holes, I can put this just like this. And I would recommend that you just get the screws started a little bit, because then you can make sure that the bracket is in exactly the right position, because I can move this around like so. So in fact, let me just show you like this, so you can see how they're offset holes, and I can move this around like this, and I want it to be, of course, going straight up and down. So now I can screw that into the side of the camera. And just because I can, I'm going to put the second one on the top here, and you can use them together, and I can still slide on all my NATO accessories from the top and the bottom with these like that as well. So we go here, and then I can lock that off. Just make sure it's square, 1 second, like that. Okay, so from this point, I have a couple of areas I can add on NATO rail accessories. So for example, I could drop in the NRC1 just like this, and then I can run a rod with a lens motor on it, for example. Or you might want to use an NRC2, which you can use to mount a video transmitter or maybe a video receiver, especially important for this camera as there is no SDI output. So that would be an option on either side. Now let's talk about the bottom. So on the bottom of the camera here, oh, by the way, I should mention that this is completely flat. So if you wanted to mount this onto a big plate, for example, or a suction system or anything else, they are now at the same height. So now let's talk about the bottom. So here we have this base plate. So it can screw into the foot of the PL mount like this. And we've designed it this way so that when you start adding the bud accessories like a CBP5 or a BPA6, then the rod heights will be perfectly optically centered for the lens mount. But of course, if you wanted to mount it just to the bottom of the camera, you can remove the PL foot and then flip this screw back to here, and then it will sit perfectly directly on the bottom of the camera. You just won't be able to use the side brackets in that instance because of the different kind of height. But we kind of assume that most people will use this camera with the PL mount or the LPL mount, especially in higher end productions. So this of course screws in with 2 screws, and there's a little registration pin in there as well to make sure everything is lined up. So now I can add in any kind of bud system base plate. All the SAM plates will work, all of the base plates for the Alexa 35 or the UAP4. But again, because this system is kind of designed for rental houses who probably have those accessories, you won't get one in the basic set itself. On the top of the base plate, you can see that we have a bubble level, which is kind of new. It's a nice little addition, I think, especially as this camera might be rigged in kind of crazy places. Lovely to have a little spirit level here. And we have some mounting points at the front. Again, I can mount an RMB3 with a rod and a lens motor. And we know that there are lots of RMB3s out in the world because they're actually the component we've sold the most of. Now from here, I can start to talk about the side brackets. And the side brackets are nice because I can add them in two different positions. I can choose to have them coming forward here, or I can run it around the other way. The bracket is symmetrical and it's the same bracket for the left and the right of the camera. I'm going to mount it over here so I don't lose access in this configuration to the mounting point on the PL mount itself. But if, for example, if you were using the LPL mount, it doesn't have a mounting point on the mount itself, so it might be good to run the side bracket in the other orientation. Now, once again, from this point, I can add in my rod mounting bracket like this and then run a rod for my lens motors. And actually I'll take that off just for now so that I can mount the other side here for you. Maybe we'll do this one going this way. Again, 4 screws, and I have a whole heap of pin locked 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch mounting points on the side bracket itself. Now, while I have the camera sideways, I can talk about the cable clamp. That is this. It says cable clamp on it, and it's going to enable me to clamp the cables so that I don't accidentally pull it out of the back of the camera. And I can do that on either the left side or on the right side of the camera here. And maybe I can show you how this works. So there's a little piece inside that slides up and down. This is exactly the same cable clamp as we have for the existing Rialto accessories. So if you've used those, you'll be familiar with it. And basically I can drop it over the cable. Maybe I'll do it this side so I can show you from the bottom. So I can drop it over the cable like this, and then it slides into the base plate while also compressing the cable. So it goes like this, and now it's in the right position. And then when I screw it in from the bottom here, it will start to compress the clamp so that nothing is wobbly or moves out of the way. So now that it's nice and secure, and this is going to move in the section going into the camera body, which is obviously the more expensive part to replace, will not be under any tension there. So that is the cable clamp. As I've already mentioned, the rod bracket would slide on here, and then the reduction insert goes inside and nicely locks off. And that is the basic set for the Sony Venice Extension Mini. Just before we move on to the Pro set, there would be a couple of options here for top handles if you need one for your system. So this is the CTH1. It's been around for a very long time, and it uses a pin-locked 3/8 inch screw to mount, and I can put it up here like this. Or you might want to use the CCH4. This is the top handle that comes with the Venice PCA cage. So if you're using a Venice and you have the other ARRI accessories for the bigger body, then you would already have one of these and it will fit. But you'll probably notice that with both of these options, we're kind of hindering access here to the filter mechanism that needs to drop into this slot here. So that's why we developed the CTH2, which is this guy here that would attach via a NATO rail. So I could use the one at the back like this, for example, lock it off. And then from here, I can both swing it around to make sure it's not in the way, and I can move it fore and aft, again, to get access to the filter slot, or maybe to find the perfect balance on my balancing rig, like an Easy Rig, for example. But that doesn't come with the basic set, that would only come with the Pro set. So maybe it makes sense right now to look at the Pro set of accessories. So this is the Pro set. We basically have the basic set as I've just built it, plus a whole bunch of new accessories. So we have 2 wooden hand grips, which both come with the NRC6. This is a NATO rail clamp, which has a rosette on the other side that you can use with existing hand grips or with hand grip extensions to get your hand grips in the right position, but of course works perfectly with the 2 new wooden hand grips. You get a third NATO rail, which you can mount in a bunch of different places. You get a BPA6, that is a bridge plate adapter. It was released with the Alexa 35. It is a combination of a shoulder pad with 15mm rod support here, and you get an integrated touch and go 120 plate here, so that will drop straight into many Sackler or O'Connor tripods or into a Euro plate. And if you unscrew it, you can add a standard BP8 or BP9 for studio rod support. You get a new backplate for the rear of the camera, and you get that marvelous CTH2, which both slides and swings out of the way of the filter module in the camera system. So let's start by talking about the back of the camera. So I'm going to flip this over, and you'll see that we have 4 mounting points here. So you can use the NATO rail on those. So I can put this here or at the top, and of course you could do that with the NATO rails you get in the basic set as well. They're all identical. But we went ahead and built this backplate, which offers you a huge amount of mounting options, all pin-locked 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch holes here, and that mounts with 4 screws. And we think this is kind of going to be the most useful accessory for mounting this camera when you maybe don't really have many other accessories on it at all. It's a big flat surface there. Now let me just screw these in. Again, ARRI multi-hex, 3mm or 4mm hex keys will work here. And we have this little cutout so that you still get access to user button number 5 back there. So instead, with my third NATO rail that I get, I currently have one at the back of the camera, one on the left-hand side because I've chosen to put this side bracket in this orientation, not going backwards like over here. And so I'm going to mount this guy up the front. Again, with these NATO rails, just get the screw started, and then you can find the right position for them to be in. So in this case, it would be like this. And now I'm going to tighten this up like so. If you wanted to, you could also run this backwards just by rotating the whole NATO rail 180 degrees. So now I can slide in my top handle, lock it off with this thumb screw down here, and then from this point, I can of course move the position wherever I like, or I can quickly slide it out of the way here so that you can get access to the filter module inside the camera, which, there we go, it's back here. So I can slide this around like this, and then screw in this screw to lock that all off. All right, let's talk about the wooden hand grips. So these are the new WHG2s. There's obviously a left and a right one, and I used to work in rentals and we had a bunch of different wooden hand grips that I really liked, but I have to say there's something special about this. This wasn't molded to my hand, but it feels fantastic. And I think when you look at the surface here, it might be a bit difficult to see on camera, but it's not kind of a uniform surface. These really look sculpted and they fit really nicely and securely in my hand. I particularly like the big platform at the top where I can kind of bear most of the weight of the camera without having to grip the grip so much. So it will help with fatigue there. The right-hand grip as well, you can add our little run stop button here, which we'll talk about in a second. It doesn't come with the Pro set, but that is an option. Maybe not for this camera, which has very limited inputs and outputs, but these grips are of course standard ARRI rosette and they'll work with all sorts of different cameras. So I'd really recommend checking these out whenever you can. Now to mount them to the Venice Extension System Mini, we've designed this to work with the NRC6. So that's a new NATO rail clamp and it will just slide on and I can lock this off like that. It's super easy to take on and off. Now, not only can this drop onto the NATO rail, but if I take the other one over here, maybe let's take this little rod mounting bracket out of the way, the NRC1. So I can actually undo this clamp all the way and then drop it straight over the NATO rail, which is nice. In some situations, depending on where the camera is positioned, it can be quite tricky to slide it off. So just know that that is also possible. And then of course I have the screw here, which I can then put directly onto the bracket. And then that will help me also find kind of the nice angle that I want. That's going to be the most ergonomic way to hold the camera. And then I can lock that off. So here we have 2 lovely wooden hand grips. In this instance, I'm probably just going to drop this a little more so that I could then run my NATO rail NRC1, the rod clamp here in the same place. And then for my lens motors, still run around like this. But of course, you could also mount it to any of the other NATO rails that you have on the system as you wish. Last but not least, we can slide the BPA 6 in here, and don't forget about, to open the clamp before you try and slide it on, but don't forget about all the other options for base plates that you can have with this system. So there we have the full Pro set for the Venice Extension System Mini from ARRI PCA. But there are a couple of little extra things you might want to consider, so let's look at the bonus section. Now, as we know, vertical or portrait mode shooting is definitely here to stay, so we've made sure that these accessories work when you rotate the camera by 90 degrees as well. Now, to do that, you need a second base plate, and I don't have one of those here today because we're still in the prototype stage, but let's imagine that there is still a base plate connected on the side so that the side brackets are nice and rigid. You can then take a second one, and you can see that these holes up the top here line up with the holes on the side bracket. So all I have to do is just take out these captive screws, drop them in the holes at the front. Let's get this lined up, and then I can screw these in. Now, this has to be with the camera basically flipped so that the assistant side or the right side of the camera is facing up. It won't work the other way, but now that that's all locked off, you can see that I can slide in one of our bud compatible base plates like this CBP5, lock it off, and now I have optically centered 15mm lightweight and 19mm studio rods. And of course I can take the CTH2 and put that on the other side bracket there, and now we have a lovely rig ready to go for vertical style shooting. All right, now for some extra little bits that you could use with this whole cage system. First off, there are many different types of handle extensions that we offer at different lengths and different angles that you can use with the system. So I'm just going to flip this over to show you that we can obviously very quickly slide on this NRC6 with the rosette here, but maybe I don't want to have the hand grip back in this position and I'd rather run it up the front so that I have a better center of gravity. Well, I can just use a little handle extension here because all of our hand grips use the same rosette system and have for many years. So I can put this up the top. If you are running a very lightweight and small setup, then actually maybe you want to consider using an RA2. This is the rosette adapter number 2. It's a very old part that we still have in the price list, and it's basically a rosette to 3/8 pin lock adapter. So I can put this straight onto the pin lock hole that Sony has very nicely added here into their lens mount. Very cool to see that they've adopted the ARRI pin lock standard, which is an open standard. You can find all of the specifications on our website. So now I can screw that in with a 4mm Allen key, and then I can add my grip straight onto the side of the camera like that. All right, and again, of course, I could run hand grip extensions there if I wanted to. I just wanted to point out that in this position, it might be nice as the hand grip is quite far forward and you couldn't use the NRC1 with the rod. I can drop an RMB3 onto the base plate just up here so that you can still have access to lens motors. And with the hand grip, there's one other little thing to talk about. So this guy is also new. This is the MRS1. That is the mountable run stop button. It looks like the little pill with a green button here. Now, you might be familiar with the green button from our film cameras. I'm very happy to say that it's been returned. So now I can slide this into the wooden hand grip here. There is a little locking screw that I can then lock on the side here. And now I have a run stop button. Of course, I need to connect it to something, so you will see in the run stop button itself, there's a little male RS connector, and you can use it with an RS to RS cable in order to trigger the camera. And we have confirmed this does work with the single 3-pin RS 24-volt out connector that's down here at the bottom of the Venice Mini Extension System, if you as an operator want to trigger run stop of the camera yourself. Now, the other little thing that I didn't really mention earlier was that the top handle here, well, it has 2 stoppers on either end, so that if I slide it all the way, it's not going to slide out. But of course, you can remove those if you needed to take the top handle out for any reason. And then you have a hex interface. So this will work with any of the standard ARRI hex handle extensions. You can have as long as a handle as you like, or a Hollywood handle with our 90-degree little angled curve bit there. And don't forget that we have both the wooden and the plastic shells that are available for the hex set, and I can mount that to either the bottom or the top of the top handle with the 2¼ inch screws there. All right, I think that is about all. This is a very customizable package of accessories for both lightweight and fully rigged setups with the Sony Venice Extension System Mini. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment section down below, and we'll see you in the next one.